Welcome back to Chess and Psychology. It's been a while. So tonight I wanted to show you a game that I played a while ago against a grandmaster about 200 rating points more than me. I had black, and I tried to use what I say and I tried to apply it in the game, and I was pretty happy with how the game turned out. So let's dive in. So I remember that I did have the chance to look at what he plays before the game, so just for a little bit I checked to see what to expect, and I saw that he really likes to get into D's position. Like this was the highest possibility of what would happen was either start with d4 or start with knight f3, so it could have started either ways because these would have been my move order regardless, and then we would have reached the same position. So yeah, I had the chance to look at what he played, and I realized that regardless of what he plays, this is probably going to happen. And this is a position that I feel very comfortable in. It's really it's quite solid, and you have a good strategic plan, and it could easily change to a dynamic position. So I really like that. And this move a4 was quite unusual in my eyes, because the usual moves are something with either c4, which is the main line, and the idea is that either the knight wants to come out from c3, or there are some different dynamic and tactical ideas to try and exploit this diagonal and then this weak square. And I've actually never seen this move a4 before this game. And after a4, I just realized that I want to play normal chess and I don't see any immediate threat, so I wasn't going to address it. Probably if I was thinking about it right now, I would have given a5 more serious consideration, just because a5 kind of blocks any idea over here, and in a long run I might have some ideas with bringing the knight from the corner if I don't want to touch my d and c pawn, and just to have some control, just brainstorming on ideas. And so probably I would have given move a5 more consideration. But anyways, I decided to just go with what I know, and I castled. And he pushed a little bit with a5, which I don't really understand. And I think I forgot to mention, but sure. The name of this opening is, it really depends on what white does, because sometimes there's g3, sometimes they play it with e3. But there's the start of it, the first move with knight f3, they usually call it Reti, but it really depends on how the game progresses, because right now it's not a very typical Reti anymore, and this is something more like Queen Indian style. Anyways, so I decided to not take this because it seemed like if I take it, then I'm putting more meaning into this whole a4 a5 idea, and if I don't address it at all, then it could be let's say I just develop or try to do something, then it would also, this a4 a5 would mean something, and I just didn't want it to mean anything for white. So I decided to play b5 to somehow take more space, and now there's not going to be c4 anymore, and this pawn is a little weak. I could start having ideas on this pawn, because b4 isn't going to happen as white anymore, at least right now. And so how about we take a moment and think about this position, like what white wants, what black wants in a little long run, especially because this is a very positional game. So let's take a second and think about that. Sure. So do we have any ideas? I'm gonna try and look at the chat as much as I can, but it might be a little hard. Okay, we have some ideas. Okay, so how about the audience? Anyone? Anything?
I think we should go play c5, d4, d5.
Mm-hmm. So as black, you just want to push the pawns?
Yeah,
okay, it does make sense. And ideally, I agree, ideally it would be nice to do that. But what about white? What do you think white should do?
probably try to put in like c3 and b4 to defend the weak a5.
Okay, so you basically want to try and push in the queen side with white and in the center with black.
Yeah.
Alright, yeah, I think that's a nice idea. So in the game, actually, he played queen d3, and I think his idea was pretty simple. He just wanted to keep looking towards the queen side, and at the same time have an idea maybe if the knight can get out in time to try and push e4 or c4. And so I think the move for black should be very easy. But so let me know what you think black should do right now.
I think black should play a6.
So you just want to keep your pawn basically, yeah? Yeah, I agree, because you could definitely think about pushing the pawn a little bit farther. But the problem, I think, is that if c4 now, then what do you want to do? Do you want to just keep the pawns over here? Are you going to play c5, or are you going to take this pawn? Because if you take it, I think this knight can take, and this is okay for white, and white is developing very logically, whereas after c5, probably, it looks playable for both sides. So I don't think there is anything to be worried about seriously right now. But anyways, I went with a6 as well because I just wanted to keep defending my pawn. And now this idea with c4 was played. Now, what do you think black should do? Should black take? Should black push? So you just want to bring your pieces out simply. But do you think knight c6 works right now?
I think so.
I'm asking this because if, excuse me?
Pawn, I think you lose the pawn.
Yeah, because I think if knight c6 right now, what if c takes b5?
Yeah, then you just lose the pawn.
Yeah, but I do like the idea that you're trying to develop your pieces. Sorry.
Yeah, I think what a black should push.
So, okay, we have some suggestions with b4. I think on chat we have some suggestion with bishop e4, but I have some internet connection problems right now. It's kind of hard for me to see.
Is it on the phone?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at it on the phone and I can't really connect to Wi-Fi.
Okay, well then I'll be looking on the other answer.
Yeah. Yeah, so, okay, anyways. We have some ideas with b4 and I did manage to see a bishop e4. And, yeah, okay, we have few bishop e4s. Okay, we're going with bishop e4. Yeah, so I think b4 is nice, but I think the problem with b4 is that your pawn is kind of a little isolated and alone over here. So if by any chance white could try and push something, maybe play some e4 and maybe try and play c5, then this pawn is really weak. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so after bishop e4, what do you think white should do? Where should white try to place the queen?
I'm thinking queen
Okay, yeah, I like the idea with queen b3. Do you see any other logical, useful places for the queen? Do we have anything on the chat?
There's typically a 25-second delay
Oh, okay.
to when they can answer.
Anything? Because I already have a queen b3 live here.
Nothing besides queen b3.
Alright, so yeah, I agree. Queen b3 is the best one because I think the problem is that if you were to play something like, if you were to move your queen somewhere that you're not supposed to, this pawn falls and then d5 can come after pretty immediately. And the other problem is that if you went to c3, now the idea with b4 could be more useful, because now even if you play queen b3, I can think about pushing to c5, or even immediately try and play maybe knight c6. And now I have some ideas of rook b8 protecting the pawn. I have enough tempi to develop the things I wanted. So that's why queen b3 should be the main move. And now black has ideally two moves to seriously consider. I mean, I'm sure there are other candidates, but these two make the most sense. So maybe give it a try. Because these are like, this is not really open, this is not really known opening anymore after a4, and it's just something that you're trying to figure out in the game. And so they're not, you just have to go move by move and try to follow the plan instead of knowing what you're doing beforehand. That's why I'm trying to ask every move, what do you want to do and what are you trying to develop? So yeah, what's up? What do you want to develop?
Yeah, probably knight c6.
Okay, I like the idea knight c6. What else you got? Whoops, sorry. This right now, there are two moves that you should consider, and b4 isn't really one of them. Let me delete that. There we go. Sorry, you didn't say the wrong move. I just clicked on the wrong thing.
And now I'm thinking b takes c4 because then you can gain control of the b file.
Yeah, so yeah, you said both of the candidate moves that you should think about. So either I think b takes c4 is good, knight c6 is also good. I do believe that knight c6 is slightly better, just because you are developing faster, and taking this doesn't really work because first thing that comes in mind is what if take. What do you think you should do now?
Rook takes a5.
You're attacking with 2, it's defended by 2.
Oh,
I think you have something much more straightforward.
Maybe bishop b4.
I like it, but I think the move that I'm considering is still more straightforward. He just took your pawn, so you're a pawn down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any direct move to try and take the pawn back? Any pawn?
Oh, bishop takes f3.
Yeah, I think this is the simplest one that at least deserves to be considered first before any other of the takes. Because if you take with the pawn, well, I just take and the center is amazing, right? And there's so many ideas, and just you're gonna try and keep this knight over here and keep pushing. If you take with the bishop, after I take your pawn, I think queen d3 is the only move. I think, because if you go away, I can consider taking your bishop more seriously. And after queen d3, now I think I have to take it because the rook is under attack, the knight is under attack. I'm sure someone would think about sacrifice, and it might work. at some point, but I think this is the only realistic thing. And then you would just push for the center and try to trick your opponent into getting that a5 pawn. And yeah, if you have to go, it's okay. It will be on YouTube later. Yeah, go play your tournaments. It will be on YouTube. Good luck.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so that's what we were thinking about as between knight c6 or b takes c4. And so I still think knight c6 is more my style right now rather than b takes c4. And so ideally I would want to be able to develop instead of trying to eat pawns. But I think b takes c4 is also, it's good enough for this situation. And after b takes c4, well, queen has to take. So now I have to figure out how to develop my pieces. And I'm gonna give the online audience a minute or two to think about that, because apparently my Wi-Fi has connected, so yay. Wow, we have 91 viewers. Haha. Let's get it to 100, please.
It won't be a problem.
Thank you. Yeah, so anyways, I'm still looking for well, suggestions from online audience, but the tip that I can give is you're almost done with developing, but don't leave your pieces hanging. So think what piece is hanging and try to make that stronger. Oh, I got a suggestion. Yay. d5. I like d5, but I feel like when you play d5, your bishop is really committed to that square. And then later on, if you play, let's say you play d5, the queen would, let's say, go to b3 or c3 or, yeah. And I think the issue is that then this knight could come and try to attack your bishop. And you don't necessarily know if that's what you want to commit to right now. And the other thing is this bishop now has a purpose. We'll go to f4 and start going after this pawn, even though it might not work immediately, but it's just pressure, and it's better to try avoiding having that pressure. So, well, I played bishop d5 just because this bishop was kind of hanging over there and I wanted it to be safer. And now if queen, pretty much regardless of where the queen goes, assuming it's not a blunder, I would want to play knight c6. So for example, if queen goes to a4, knight c6. If the queen would go to c2, again knight c6, just because this knight belongs to c6, and I don't necessarily know where exactly I would want my pawns, my c7 and d7 pawns to be, because I don't know if I want to push them just yet. And that's why I would put the knight where I know I want the knight to be. And okay, so what do you think white could do? Because white still has to finish developing. So I got a suggestion about knight c3. Do you think knight c3 works? And think about why I played knight c6. It's to develop, but it's not the only idea. Okay, think about this. If right now it was black's to move, what would you do? We have a small message, yellow message over here. So I'm getting a lot of interesting ideas about knight b4s, but I think what I want to do is kind of way simpler than that. I see something defenseless and I'm going after it, pretty much. I'm still getting a lot of rook b8s and knight b4s. Those are good ideas, but I love eating pawns. Think about pawns. Yes, thank you. Finally, someone. Lot of lols. Bishop takes f3. Yeah, I mean that was pretty much my idea. If you're not gonna defend your pawn or if your knights, I'm going to eat that pawn and probably say thank you in my mind. So if you play, if you were to play knight c3, I would definitely take this, and I would just enjoy my life with one pawn more, and then I would just dominate the center, and this should be pretty easy after that. So, all right. As soon as I play knight c6, if you're thinking about white, if you're white and you're thinking what you should do as white, you should immediately know that knight c6, I'm going after your d4 pawn. So the next move that you do should have something to do with defending that area, either the d4 pawn or some support for f3. So I played after knight c6. He played knight d2, and I'm assuming his idea was very simple, to just defend this guy. And now I can't do that anymore because of, well, now it's defended. And it's kind of pointless to give my strong bishop up. So after knight d2, I realized that my knight here, its job is done and it needs to relocate. So that's why I played knight b4. Also, the idea with knight b4 was that I simply want to try and push some pawns over here to get more space, to try and get more pawns in center. And also, if it was white to move again, right now, white has this e4 idea, right? So if I did something weird like rook b8, e4 would kind of hurt my bishop a little bit. So that's why knight b4. Opening up room for bishop, opening up room for my c-pawn to go. And so after queen b1, I decided to play c5, mainly because, well, if you take, awesome, now this makes so much sense. My bishop is so strong over here, and both my bishops have these two diagonals, and it just looks very comfortable for black and very uncomfortable for white. So I'm assuming that's why he played e4. He was also a grandmaster, like 25-70, so I'm sure he saw these while I was thinking about them as well. Anyways, so after e4, I played bishop c6 mainly because, well, I don't want to play bishop b7 because I don't know if I want my rook to come to b8 at some point. Anyways, bishop c6. I was a little surprised after e5 because, well, first of all, what else can white do? But objectively, when you play e5, now I'm going to play this knight d5, and this just feels very comfortable, just having this strong knights over here in this outposts. And yeah, it felt really nice, to be honest. And so after knight e4, another thing that you could notice is that right now my game is more towards center, towards queen side, while white is going from center more towards king side. A lot of sides right now. And so the thing is, it's mainly determined because of the pawn structure. So just because of these pawns over here, my king is a little bit undefended, and it gives white some ideas to try and use that. While because of the pawn structure, because I have this pawn over here, and I have more space over here, and I have these outposts over in the queen side, yeah. So I just saw a comment from Mr. SpongeBob, or lots of lols, or I'm running out of names, funny names. Yeah, so black has kind of equalized, not only equalized, but black is at least slightly better. And yeah, so my opponent, after knight e4, well, he played knight e4 with the idea to do knight g5 at some point, and I decided to ignore this and I took on d4 because I kind of thought that taking on d4, I thought it was time to open up the center a little, but after the game I realized that bishop b5 would have also been a viable option. At least it was something that I considered very briefly, but I didn't know if I wanted to play it in the game necessarily, because rook d1, bishop e2, and I'm kind of pushing this knight to go to g5. And I wasn't sure if this is how I want to go. Well, I mean, if you take, well, this falls. But when you take with knight, and I do believe that I saw this position up until here, and I kind of stopped thinking about it, which was a mistake, because right now I have this move c4, which is pretty strong, and it's going for more outposts. And I think I should have done this, and I kind of regretted it because it would have made so much sense. But anyways, so I decided to simplify the game a little bit, and I decided to go for a prophylaxis move such as h6. The other moves to consider were like rook b8 or queen c7, but I simply just wanted to do the prophylaxis move and not worry about knight g5 ever again. Yeah. And he played bishop d2, and maybe take a minute to think about this position, because a lot of things have changed since the last time I asked. So yeah, think what would you want to do with black? Any ideas, any threats? Hmm, 98 viewers. 2 more, please. I mean, one of them is. Ah, and I missed it. It's okay. Well, I see a bishop b5, I see rook b8, I see things like that, but I think the thing to consider is, well, after bishop b5, first of all, is white going to take this? And also, aren't you worried about, some takings? And if you take with the knight, then maybe some ideas. And or if bishop b5, sorry, I completely forgot. You should take this first. And then you could try and have some ideas with, trying to put more pressure on this knight because it's pinned. And I just don't know if I was comfortable with that, especially because the bishop on c6 is doing well. I don't think I need to move it, because if you take it, I can just take back with the knight, least of all, and keep attacking your a5 pawn. And yeah. Okay, so I liked the idea rook b8 just because it was a very simple move, and now I want to do the idea with bishop b5. So let's say, Lou, you play something simple like rook e1, I want to play bishop b5. And now when you take it, instead of having to take with the pawn, I can just take with the rook, and I'm going after this pawn. And I really like that idea, and I don't really have to think about this diagonal and this pin anymore, because my rook is up here already. So yeah, and so this is how the game actually was played. And yes, 101, and I see it this time. Yeah, so take 30 seconds and think about whether or not white should try to exchange some pieces off, or if not, then what do you want to do with white? Because I'm going after that a5 pawn. Sorry for your ears. No, I don't have coronavirus. I did go to health center yesterday, but thank you for the asking.
No coronavirus here.
Nope,
yet.
they checked me yesterday. Yeah, all the black pieces are on queen side. It's pretty true, except for that rook. Okay, so I want to get through with the game, so I kind of have to rush a little. Sorry. And so at this point, he decided to go with knight c3 just to try and open up a little bit, mainly because I know it's kind of cliche that you heard that two bishops like open center, but it's also true two bishops do like open center, because if the center is closed and all the pieces are kind of like this cluttered together, then you can't really use the two bishops. So, and that's only compensation that white could consider right now. And so this is actually how the game went down, and I managed to get a pawn. And I decided to try and free up my f8 rook, because right now if I play something like queen c7, more likely than not he's going to take back his pawn, and now he has a slightly more active position, because this pawn is kind of, I can't really push it. I mean, I can, but I need more preparation. Like, I need to try and play rook d8, and then I need to try and push, and I don't know if it's going to actually work. Technically, I could try to take, maybe take on b2, maybe. At least it doesn't look that appealing to me, just because there could always be more pressure on my king side, even though I have one more pawn. There could just, this isn't the ideal position that I would want, just looking at it from here. I would much rather place my queen on c8, have it happy and protecting my pawns, rather than get to that position where white has a lot of game. Oh yeah, it's another good advice. Don't let your opponent get too much game. Yeah. So, yeah. At this point, queen a4 was played, and I realized that, okay, this knight has got to come back a little, but my position started to get really passive, and I kind of wonder if it was worth it going after this pawn. I don't know if I would do it again, but at this point I'm very committed to taking the pawn, and I don't really know what else to do, because my two bishops are gone, and I think the points where I could have avoided it was bishop b5, and it would have still kept the pressure in center, and I was more comfortable with that rather than having this more pawn but being slightly uncomfortable, because now I have to try and keep the pawn, because if I just give up the pawn that I have more, then white has two bishops and probably a passed pawn that's going to be defended with this bishop, another rook, and it would have been very uncomfortable. So I tried to keep my pawn as hard as I could. And at this point, it's kind of, realistically, this pawn would fall, but at the same time, if this pawn falls, it's kind of okay, because we would exchange. He would give up his two bishops for this pawn, and I was okay with that. As long as he didn't have the two bishops, I could still have a good enough game. So I decided to try and open up the game a little bit, and I think my idea was that, well, if you take, I am simply going to take back and try to go for this pawn over here, and maybe at some point d5. And, well, since he was a grandmaster, he didn't give me that option, and he simply played bishop d3. Now bishop d3, there could be some ideas with queen e4 and looking at some uncomfortable mates over here. So I decided to try and exchange queens, because I simply didn't really, I realized that there isn't anything left in the board with queens on it for me to fight for, because I don't really have any plans with the queens on the board. He's the one who's pushing, so I just didn't like having that sort of pressure. So I went with offering to exchange queens. And if he refused, well, where can he place his queen? If he just goes somewhere else, I could probably just play f5, and all of his hopes of attacks on the king side would just be over. So I think that's why he just decided to agree to the queen exchange and then a little more exchange. And, well, he kind of can't take the pawn over here and go to a rook endgame, which is most likely going to end in a draw, well, theoretically. But he decided to push a little bit more for the, just to bring the king a little bit closer before going to that rook endgame. And I realized that I can't really bring my king any closer, and it's now or never. I have to push this pawn, or I'm not going to actually have any game, and he would have more, he would have the upper hand basically, even though I'm still one pawn more in the game. The last thing that I thought about was maybe knight c6 would have worked, because if you take it with the rook, I could think about knight b4, and I could also think about rook b8. And I could try and start putting pressure on this pawn. Now if you play rook a2, I have knight b4. If you don't play rook a2, well, your pawn is kind of falling. So probably I could have considered knight c6 more seriously. And so I decided to go with d5, and I'm going to rush it a little because I still have to get through the end game, and I have about 5 minutes, so yay. My opponent decided to ignore the fact that I still have one pawn more and keep going for the space advantage and pieces activities. And if it was white to move again, white would give me this check, and my king would have to go back to g8. And that was not going to happen in that game. No, my king is not going back. So I just played f5. And so my idea was, if you give me the check rook b7, I'm going to simply play king f6 or g6, either one. So he simply went for rook b6 and started to push a little bit before taking the pawn. The a6 pawn. And I realized that, okay, so my rook's job here is over. I'm gonna bring the rook closer, I'm gonna bring the king closer, and as soon as you give me this check and you go after that pawn, okay, this is the last move that I'm gonna ask you to think about, because it's kind of a cute move. Think about checks. Well, I hate to spoil the fun, but so I pushed d4, check. My idea was, when you take it, I'm gonna give you this check. And depends on where you go. If you go to e3, I'll simply take, then if you go to e3, I'll simply take this and I'll start pushing this. Yay. But well, if you go king c3, now your king is against my rook, and I can bring my knight a little closer to the other part of the game. And this is how it actually happens. I managed to exchange the pawns off of the board in the queen side, so now the game is fully concentrated on the center and king side. And it's good because when you have a knight, you want the game to be once in one side instead of all over the board, because the bishop can get to all over the board faster. Bishop e2 was also a very good move because I had ideas with knight f3 check to take the pawn, or knight g4 and attack two pawns, and bishop e2 kind of eliminated those. I started to push a little bit more to try and see how much activity I can get out of this game. And so up until here, most of it is very straightforward. But this knight e5 was very interesting to me because right now white has the option of trying to probably move the king, and I think what I was going for was a repetition. I think that's what I was going for. Well, you have to come to e3, because if you go to e1, I have this nasty knight d3, but if you come to e3, I still have the same checks, and I liked my position quite a lot. So I think that's why he realized there isn't much to fight for anymore, and he decided to let me exchange more pawns. And now it was just very simple. The only thing I have to do is to realize that there isn't much to push for, don't push and make blunders, and to be happy with my position, basically. So at this point, I really wish I could ask you what you want to do. I can't. You can pause the video and think about it before me giving it up. But you could play rook e5. Simply, your idea is to cut out this king. You don't want to let the king get closer to the king side. And you want to bring your own king. And at this point, I think he also realized that this game is about to be wrapped up with a draw, and he was okay with it. I just went for the pawn and voila. Yeah, I really liked this game, especially because I remember this was one of the first tournaments that I played after I didn't play chess for a few months when I was studying for SATs. And I really liked that I was like, oh, I'm playing good, I still got it. I still remember how to play chess. And I really liked this game. And now I'm gonna sign off, give the mic to R in a little bit. And I hope you enjoyed it.